Our theme this month is growth. And my topic today is transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is a portion of a biblical verse from the book of Romans 12:2. It says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove that which is the most good, acceptable, and perfect will of God." Growth. You know, we often are either seeking or feel ourselves responding to change. There's a lot of change going on right now. All change, however, is not growth. All change is not growth. And all growth is not necessarily transformation. Okay? A lot of times when we're being pushed by pain, instead of being pulled by vision, we just want things to be different. We're tired of the way that it is, and we seek some kind of change. But you take you with you wherever you go. So we may manifest something different, but underneath it all, sometimes it's just the same old thing in a different pair of trousers with a different address. But it really isn't anything different. So beware of that, just wanting it to be different, because it doesn't necessarily represent a change. And when we do get change, change in and of itself doesn't mean that we're growing. Change just means that it isn't exactly the way that it was before. I love that phrase that some people have the same experience. Some people have 1,000 different experiences, and other people have the same experience 1,000 times. Okay? It isn't growth until there's some maturation. The change isn't growth until you've learned a little bit of something. It's not growth until there's some actual progress. Now, this distinction that I make between growth and transformation is that when something truly transforms, it can no longer be recognized for what it used to be. Catch the difference in that. Growth, you can see how the same thing has become more mature and better. When something has transformed, you don't even recognize it for what it used to be. It could be something as simple as a table or a lamp. From time to time, I talk about one of my best friends in Los Angeles. He died of AIDS in the early 90s. We used to call him the queen of garage sales. David could just take anything. You think it's an old piece of junk, and by the time he got through with it, you thought it just came, straight off of Fifth Avenue or something like that. So he could get an old lamp or chair or something like that, and when you go to his house, after a week or two and you see that thing, it doesn't even look like what was in the garage sale. If he didn't tell you that it was what was in the garage sale, you wouldn't even know that it was the same thing that was in the garage sale. As opposed to, you go and you go, "Oh, boy, you sure fixed that lamp up. That's a nice new shade. Gee, that color looks good on it." But you're pretty sure that you're still looking at that. Are you with me? So what happens for us in life is that we have to make a choice sometimes, whether we just want to grow or whether we want to transform. We have to make a choice of whether we want to grow or whether we want to transform. See, when the transformation comes, You're not telling the old story anymore. When the transformation comes, that story is sort of irrelevant. And I'm not saying that everything about your life doesn't have meaning. It's just that when you transform, that old stuff is not what you revolve around anymore. See, when there's a transformation, there's a revolution that takes place in your life. That root of the word revolution is revolve. That something revolves around something. When there is a revolution, the center that things revolve around shifts. That's what creates the revolution. There's a shift in the center of what revolves around. So what is your life revolving around? Is your life revolving around hurt? Is it revolving around pain? Is it revolving around hurt, desire? Is it revolving around your plans, your expectations, the economy, other people's stuff? Just what is your life revolving around? And when we allow the center of our life and that which we revolve around to be God, to be truth, to be beauty and wisdom and the greatest of all the spiritual qualities, there's a shift that happens in our lives. It's a Copernican moment. You know, Copernicus was that one to help us really understand that the earth is not the center of the universe. Because there was the idea that the sun was setting and rising around humanity and earth at the center of the universe. And it was very disconcerting to realize that the sun's not moving around us, we're moving around the sun. That the sun doesn't move at all, that when it's dark, we've moved away. We have that same kind of Copernican moment in our lives. We have this tendency to think that we're at the center, and God and the light and everything else is moving around us. Sometimes the light comes in and sometimes the light goes. Sometimes God's around and sometimes God's not. Sometimes good is here and sometimes God's not. No. No. God, like the sun, is just there. And we keep revolving around it. We spin off and we come back. We shift. We have seasons. We're doing all those changes and whatnot, depending upon how we are connected and sort of the angle that we have to the divine. But it's not shifting. It's not shifting at all. When you have that place of transformation, you can no longer be recognized for what you used to be. That's part of the reason I love the prison work so much, is because I have a chance to witness real transformation. Real transformation. A lot of the work that we do is with lifers. And I tell you, there is something about somebody who's been in prison for 20-something years. Now, I've worked pretty exclusively with males. And I talk about it, it's this sort of healed male energy. That when you take away the women and the cars and the money and the bling bling and striving up the corporate ladder and like all the stuff that would ordinarily define masculinity, and you don't have any of that. And you have to find some purpose and reason for being and meaning in life in the most horrific kind of conditions. There is something that emerges out of that. That the transformation of these individuals. Now, granted, I have met some people who have been locked up for several decades who in fact were innocent and out. But for the most part, the people that I see in prison are quite aware of why they're there. They know why they're there. But the person that I see now is not the person that they were. I want you to catch that. The person I see now is not the person that they were because they have so transformed. And I can watch the stages. I can watch the younger ones and I can see they've grown. I can see the ones that have just grown and the ones who have transformed. Okay. And we get to make that choice. How do we transform? says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. This renewing is a qualitative renewing. This is a shift and a change. This isn't like renewing your driver's license, where it expired and you go and you renew it and you get the same license that you had before. There's really no difference in it, except that this one has an expiration date that's a little bit longer. You just have to check in every now and then, so to speak, but it's not a different license. You didn't really renew your license in this sense. You just went back, got it extended. That's not the renewal that this speaks of. The word that's being used in Scripture for renew speaks of a qualitative renewal. I want you to catch that. There's something that shifts. It speaks of this kind of transformation. It's the sort of renewal that happens in the springtime when the garden is renewed. It's not the same garden that it was before. There's something else that's coming forth. It's a little bit different. It has the same substance and it has the same essence, but how it is expressing itself now is greater and it's more expansive. It says we have to be renewed, it says, by the renewing of our minds. Now, sometimes in Scripture, when the word mind is being used, it doesn't necessarily mean just our mental capacity. Sometimes when the word mind is being used, it's talking about the totality of us. All of us. We, in our Western version, and that's part of what's happening here, because the first beginnings of Christianity came from the Greeks, the fathers of Western thought, and they started to separate out the idea of the head and the heart and the mind. The Hebrews didn't do all that kind of separation. It was a much more total kind of a thing. So the Romans, this passage that we get in Romans 12:2 that I mentioned, be ye not conformed to this world, this age, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. This mind that it speaks of is a mental perception. I did some of the definitions on this, and I love the way it's described. It's this mind. It's described as the organ of mental perception and apprehension. It's the organ of consciousness. It's the understanding of the word. It's the intellectual faculty. It's the understanding that comes from a moral reflection. There is something that has to happen with your thinking. I want you to catch this. So often, we are working on the heart. We want to cleanse our heart, and we want to cleanse our emotions. And yes, we should do that. And we got to put something else up in here. We have to shift our paradigms. We have to shift our perceptions. We have to shift what we see. We have to shift our beliefs. We have to shift the way in which things are looking to us. Breathe that in for a moment. If you go to therapy because your heart hurts, you're not going to get a change of heart without a change of mind. If you go into recovery because you want to get rid of some kind of addiction, you're not going to be able to rid yourself of addiction until you can rid yourself of some of the old tapes that are going on in your mind. Your drinking is not your problem. Your drinking is the evidence that you have a problem. And part of that problem is the scrambled information that's going on in our head. It's the narratives that we have told ourselves thus far. It's the way we've put it together. I like the way the 12-step program says your best thinking has gotten you here. And you can't change something with the same consciousness that created it. Catch that. You can't change it with the same consciousness that created it. So too often we're trying to get transformation through change by twiddling around with the outer stuff, the material world, but we haven't shifted. We're still showing up the same way. It reminds me of this thing I heard Marianne Williamson say years ago. Perhaps it was in her book, Return to Love, where she said this friend of hers was complaining about the fact that every place that she went, that she only met men who wouldn't commit. And Marianne said to her, your problem is not you keep meeting men that won't commit. The problem is you keep giving them your phone number. Because if you don't change, you're just going to keep meeting the same thing over and over and over again. There has to be a real intent. And you can see I'm passionate about this, because this is the raw stuff of what Inner Light is about. The raw stuff of what we are about is healing, the growth, getting a new awareness, a new consciousness, so that you can shift and show up in life differently. So that we can heal the sense of separation. That we can let go of the doom and the gloom and the lack of the limitation and all the stories that are keeping us from being the powerful spiritual beings that we are called to be. That's why we're here. We're here not to just do a bunch of different things. It's wonderful to do things, but if your heart isn't different, it doesn't matter how many people you feed, if in your mind you haven't shifted your relationship to them and you have not empowered them. It doesn't matter how many people you feed if what you still see are poor, wretched people, and you're just so pleased that God has blessed you and you're sharing your gifts with all these poor, wretched people. We're just going to keep having poor, wretched people. And this idea of some people who are blessed and some people who are not. You hear me say all the time that Jesus is my main man. We honor all paths. And some folks don't relate to Jesus, but I was raised really evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic, fundamentalist. Now, I don't see everything all through that lens, but I did develop this sense of what it might be like to walk around in the world as one who understood that they were a son or daughter of the Most High. What would that be like? What would that be like if we stopped praying for me, and our prayers started off with our? What might that be like if we were to not discriminate? If we were to see everybody as our equal? Or we would not allow race, creed, or color, or religious, or educational status, or gender, or any of those kinds of things to get in the way of us seeing a divine person. Can you imagine the difference it would be if we weren't a church that just was feeding people, and we were a church that was affirming people's dignity and humanity? And out of the affirmation of the dignity and their humanity, of course you deserve to be fed. Where out of that feeding, you get a sense of your worthiness. That's what we do here. That's what we do here with our food bank. The thing that we get told in the prison the most is thank you for treating us like we're humans, which I'm sure is meant to be a compliment, but it makes me hurt because nobody should ever have to be thanked for treating somebody like a human being. But you know what? My mind had to be renewed. I was as prejudiced, I was as judgmental as the next person. I know when those calls were coming in to go into the prison, what? You have got to be kidding me. And when I was told that it was a Muslim imam that was asking me to go into a male prison, I remember, it isn't often I do this, but I really did do this. I remember I looked up and said, God, what are you smoking? Me. You want that? Me. Miss out, black, female pastor, blah, 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 to go to this men's prison with the Muslims. Uh-huh. And I tell the story from time to time how we got a little turned around the first time we went. It was Valerie Joy and Mary Simone and me. There are two prisons very close together. The other one's called Avenal. And we stopped off at the coffee shop and had a bite to eat, and we asked, where's the prison? It never occurred to me there'd be two. So we got sent to the other one, which is like within a few miles. But clearly, we hadn't reached the one we were going to, and it's just like nothing out there. And there was this one little stand that was left. And we went to the stand, and Valerie Joy went in, and she said, the guy asked her the strangest question. He said, he looked at her and said, when he asked for directions to this prison, is he worth it? That was the question. We hadn't gone in yet. And I would tell that sometimes to the men. And I'd say, I know the answer to the question now. And the answer is yes. That's the answer to the question. Okay? But my mind had to be renewed. My mind had to be transformed. In order for me to get to this place of love, I had to be challenged on my biases and on my prejudices. And you know what happens when you get challenged on your biases and your prejudices? Is not only do you elevate people, you got to knock yourself down a couple of inches. Breathe. See, that's the problem we have now around equality. I think a couple of years ago I told this story. It was just too priceless. So in All in the Family, Archie Bunker has this moment where his wife Edith is running around with this friend of hers who is quite the feminist, and she's busy feminizing Edith. So he would come home and Edith wasn't there cooking dinner and that kind of stuff. So he's got it in his mind, he's going to break up this duo. And the way he's going to do this is he's going to get this woman a job. He goes to HR in his company and finds out there are these openings, tells this woman, and she gets hired. And he's thinking, good. Well, turns out he looks around and there she is next to him on the dock operating a forklift. He is done. He is just too through. So his boss calls him in and says, Archie, do you know what's going on? There's somebody who keeps harassing this woman. Says she's really, really good. She's one of the best forklifters we've ever had. And you know how hard we tried with affirmative action to like really, and here we've got like a great, do you know what's going on? Archie plays dumb, like he can't even imagine what's going on. So he comes home, and he is livid. He is livid. So he's going off on Rob Reiner, Meathead, his son-in-law. And he's just going in and he says, it's just not fair. It's just not fair. All this equality stuff, it's just not fair. So Bob's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? He says, a man works hard all of his life trying to get ahead just to wind up equal. It's just not fair. I contend there's a little Archie Bunker in all of us. A little Archie Bunker in all of us. Particularly when we're raised in a world that tells us that value comes from being different. That value comes from somehow distinguishing who you are or what you are so much that it's different than something else. That's how we do value in objects. That if it's common and anybody can have it, or it's not special in any kind of way, it doesn't have as much value. Do you feel that? So we've created this society where oneness doesn't bring value. Everybody being equal and fair and just, it doesn't bring value. That means we have to have a revolution. We have to have a revolution about what is at that center. We have to have a revolution about what is important. That transformation that we have in our lives, there's a revolution that happens where we begin to realize that the things that we had held out as the most important aren't the things that we should revolve around. Be not conformed. Conform to go with it. This world, or a better translation would really be this age, this time. Don't just go along with everything that's happening now in this age, where you stop thinking, you stop growing, you stop healing, you stop transforming because you're busy going along with the stuff that's put in front of us. We are in an unprecedented historical period where we are bombarded by more information than has ever happened in all of humanity. Just think about that for a second. No other generation in the world has been subjected to as much information as we are subjected to. Our nervous systems haven't even caught up to this. We don't even know how to filter this much information and stuff that's going on, which is why we have to be really, really deliberate. We have to really, really choose. We have to really, really be conscious about what we feed our minds. We have to be extremely conscious about what we allow to be the focus of our attention. We are not responsible for all the thoughts that come to us, only the ones we keep. Only the ones that we repeat. This transformation doesn't happen on its own. It happens through a consistency. It happens through a discipline. I want you to breathe that in. It happens through a discipline. The root of discipline is disciple. Following something wholeheartedly. If you want to grow, there has to be a choice. If you want to grow, there has to be a choice. If you want to grow, there has to be a choice. In this choice, it does not mean condemning where you've been. The seed that clings to being a seed will never fulfill its great purpose in life. It's just time for what's next. See? The seed doesn't, that little root, it doesn't have to judge the fact that it was once a seed. It was appropriate to be a seed. Now it's just time to be something else. When it becomes a big trunk or a bark, it's okay not to be just a little sprout anymore, because now it's time to be something else. Are you with me? This idea of be ye renewed by the transforming of your mind so that you can prove that which is the most good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. Now just breathe a little bit, because I know that sounds real fundamentalist. So just breathe. Breathe. I speak of this to time about proving. It's discerning. It's distinguishing. It's the notion of proving a thing, whether it to be worthy to be received or not. Something good is always expected out of this kind of proving. This is the test drive kind of prove. This is prove me. Prove it. That if you don't transform your mind, there's something that you're not going to know. There's something you're not going to know. There's something you're not going to be able to prove for yourself. Prove that which is the good. This is a benevolent good. This is a good that's profitable. It's useless. It's useful. It's not just constitutionally good, but it benefits others. This is akin to the Hebrew good. It's good. And God said it was good. That it's something that is a benefit to everybody. That which is acceptable. This acceptable means in a harmonious, pleasing kind of way. See, there's something that's a will of God that is beneficial to everybody, and it is harmonious. It says, and a perfect will of God. We think of perfect as flawless. That's not what the word perfect means. This word perfect means adult, full grown, as the opposite of infancy or childhood. It is the full goal of which something is intended. When it says, be ye perfect, it's not saying be without flaws, it's saying grow up. Grow up. Mature. Accept the mantle of your spirituality and be the all that you can be. This will that it speaks of, it's not a demand. It's not a demand. It says it is an expression or an inclination of pleasure towards that which is liked or that which creates joy. There is a propensity of God. It's not some big demand, but there is something in the universe that moves towards joy. That is its propensity. That if there were not all the restrictions and all the constrictions, then everybody would be free to develop their own potential. If there were not the restrictions and the constrictions, then the playing field would be level. If it were not for all the man-made stuff that we came up with, there would not be the divisiveness. Difference doesn't cause division. Polarization around difference causes division. Difference in and of itself has never caused division. So can you imagine if we would just allow forth that which is harmonious, that which is beneficial to all, that which is maturely grown and spiritually fulfilled, if we would allow that to be, then we could experience what we call the will of God. Without drama and without trauma, but we won't see it unless we allow our minds to be transformed. Breathe that in. Allow your mind to be transformed. Not just changed, not just growing, but where stuff slips out of your mouth that you can't even imagine. Where forgiveness slips out of your mouth before you even have a chance to take it back. Where kindness shows up when you didn't even have any intent to do that. Where your blessing in a moment that you might have judged. Where you find that place where you're temper might have been quick. All of a sudden, you find yourself just taking a deep breath and remembering there's a child of God standing in front of you. This is that place of transformation. This is that place of transformation, and it appears to kind of creep up on you. Okay? This isn't popcorn. It doesn't happen. Just, you get the vision, yes, but it takes the consistency of feeding your mind. So just think about this for a moment as we close. What gets the bulk of your attention? If ideas and thoughts and beliefs were a diet, what's your daily diet? What calories do you take in? Are you willing to switch your diet? Are you willing to cut out some stuff? And you know what happens when we shift our diet? At first, as the Bible says, there's a lot of gnawing and gnashing of teeth. But you know what happens? You get acclimated, and your body craves what's good for it. If you just give it a chance to be exposed to what's good for it, it'll reject the other stuff. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's the same thing. If you allow yourself to fast from the negativity, the gossip or whatever, you'll automatically reject it. It'll come into your space, and there won't be any room for it because you have so cultivated something else. I know we can do it, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here. And I want to invite you, particularly now, at the beginning of this fall season, check out the classes, check out the workshops and things that we have. I mean, we're here specifically for that, so that we can have this change of mind that can change our hearts, that can have us show up, and we can be the change that we want to see in the world. That's why we're here. Yes? Let's take a breath and let's pray.